Through you, Mr. Mayor, my apologies for the delay, but the meeting is now live.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And to those who were waiting, thank you for waiting patiently while we were resolving some technical difficulties with the live stream. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's special council meeting. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, City Hall continues to not be open except by appointment only for very limited services. Members of the public are invited to participate in this meeting electronically by accessing the meeting live stream video at kitchener.ca/watchnow. While in-person delegation requests were not feasible at this time, members of the public were invited to submit written comments or participate electronically in the meeting by contacting delegation@kitchener.ca. Delegates must have registered by 9 a.m. On today's date in order to participate electronically. Any written comments received prior to that time have been circulated and will form part of the public record. As we begin today's meeting, I'd like to acknowledge that today we gather on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. We have two items on the agenda, both part of our strategic session. The first one on a parks and open space strategy, and the second on policy and research planning work plan. We're going to try to take a 5-minute break in between the two and start promptly after that. If I can ask the presenters to keep their presentations as tight as possible. We do have one delegation that registered for the Parks and Open Space piece, Mr. Steve Burrows. So we will be hearing from him after Mr. Lobley's presentation. And we have to, just for everyone's information, we will be having a hard break at 4:30 after this and the first part of our caucus session, and coming back to finish caucus at 6 and council at 7. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lobley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, members of council. I'm delighted to be here today to start sharing the Places and Spaces journey, and hopefully you can now see my screen, and if somebody wouldn't mind giving me a thumbs up just to say that they can see a screen. Good, thank you. No,
we're not seeing it, Niall.
Oh, we're not seeing it. Why aren't we seeing it? We should be seeing it. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Oh, I have to hit that button. There we go. That should help. Now you can see it, hopefully.
We can.
Great, fantastic. So I'm delighted to be here this afternoon, members of council, to talk to you about Places and Spaces. But before we dive into it, if you'd like to grab your cellular device or go over to Menti, I circulated a code a little bit earlier on this afternoon. We're going to start off with just a couple of quick questions to get you thinking about parks and open space. These next few questions are very much meant to just get you thinking. So don't try thinking too hard. They don't require in-depth detail or knowledge to get started with, really just to get us into thinking about parks and open spaces and using a Menti tool. So the first question there is, when you think of the word park, what words come to mind? And I think I've given you space for up to 3 different words.
Now, as where you probably all using different devices, it may not be as easy for us to input. I'm having some difficulty, so bear with me if you don't get my results.
Same. I can't input anything but numbers. I'm sure it's user error here.
Council, so you go to www.menti.com. Then you enter the numbers that Mr. Lobley sent to us in the email earlier. And that should then take you to the questions.
I think I filled mine in right. Did you see anything, Mr. Lobley?
I will put the results up. I will
Oh,
highlight the results so that
okay.
we can see them. So certainly we've heard from 5 of you so far. And if you can see your words on there, Councillor Michaud, then it worked.
It did work. Thank you.
Great stuff.
Anybody else still having problems? Councillor Marsh?
Yeah, the code is not working for me. Oh. Okay, I got it.
Okay,
Sorry.
Great stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I say, these first couple of questions are just to get our heads into the mind space. So no great problem if you don't get a chance to respond. So bearing in mind the tightness of the agenda, I'll move on to the next question. So now thinking about parks specifically in Kitchener, what 3 words come to your mind? And again, these can be positive or negative. Hopefully they're mainly positive, but if you want to throw a negative one in there, feel free to. Well, I'm glad to see it's mainly positive words which are coming from you. So that's great news. And we'll move on to one more. If you want to give us a favourite park in Kitchener, and if you can't remember the name of the park that comes to your mind, feel free to give us a street that it is on or something along those sorts of lines. Victoria Park's getting the love. Now I can't see who's voted for which parks, but I can probably make a guess at one or two of those votes. But thank you very much. And then last but by no means least, before we get into the presentation, how satisfied are you with Kitchener's parks? So we're hovering around about the middle of the scale there. So definitely room for some improvement, but it's not all bad news at this point in time. So it's probably a good time for us to be talking about places and spaces, which is the name we're giving for the open space strategy, the Parks and Open Space strategy for the City of Kitchener. So just to run over quickly what we're going to do today, I have about a 20-minute presentation, which has got a few more questions embedded into it that we'll come on to, focused on 3 strategic discussion topics, which are outlined in the report and we'll be covering on today. And then will be the focus, those 3 topics will be the focus for the onward conversation throughout the rest of the session. We're particularly keen to hear from council on all those topics and indeed any other topic you might have to be considered through places and spaces. But given some of the focus we have on the early stages of this, on the spaces part of places and spaces, and I'll talk about that in a second, your response and feedback and discussion, particularly on the strategic discussion themes 2 and 3, will be particularly valuable through the balance of this session, as they're the areas we're going to be working on most immediately following today's session. So we have Kitchener has a Parks and Open Space strategy as a strategic topic within the council's corporate strategic plan. So that needed to be completed or needs to be completed by 2021. Obviously, as a result of COVID and some of the deferrals we've seen, we are running a little bit behind, but we are starting that work, and indeed background work has been going on for much of this year. So we are running a little bit behind and re-timetabling it, but work has commenced on the open space strategy. It follows the 2010 Parks Master Plan, which was the guiding document by which decisions around Parkland are made today. Obviously, it being 10 years old, it's time to reimagine that and recast it within our current day community. And so Places and Spaces is the replacement document to the Parks Master Plan, and it is also addressing the needs identified through the strategic plan as being the open space strategy for the City of Kitchener. It really does break down into 2 separate documents, and each one will be worked on together to come together as Places and Spaces as a single strategy when completed. Places part of the Place and Space strategy will focus on the quality of parks, the sorts of things that community want to see in parks and the things that community want to do in parks. It's what makes a good park, it's what goes into a park, and where do those things go into parks. And so really we're looking there at the quality of park spaces. And so that's an exercise which will take extensive community feedback and engagement. And we'll need to listen to what communities want their parks to be. Spaces is about the quantity of parks. And spaces is a part we're going to be dealing with first. And it's talking about where we have parks, how many parks we've got, where do we need them, do we need more of them, and how will we get those parks? So 2 distinct documents or 2 distinct strategies that make up Places and Spaces. I'm going to focus initially on Places, and Places will take the format of a series of guidance documents. We don't want to create some weighty tome that sits on a shelf and gathers dust, but something which is agile and responsive and can be changed as needed. And so we see this as a series of guidance documents, each guidance document responding to a community need within a park or an open space, and helping provide the context for how we meet that need on a go-forward basis. To start with, we've come together and we put 27 of these sorts of themes together, 27 of these guidance documents together in our minds, grouped under 5 themes. Now, this has been an exercise done by just staff at this point in time, so we hope it be relatively close to being accurate, but we're sure as we hear from you and as we hear from community, this list of 27 will either shrink or grow as we hear what is important in parks and open spaces in Kitchener on a go-forward basis. So just to get your sense, I wouldn't mind knowing where on these 27, and these are figure 1 within the background document, and I do see there's a question. So I'll pause after this before I go to the Menti question. Where do you feel that there might be areas that we need to include, or are there some things that we've included in that figure 1, which perhaps we don't need to include within Places and Spaces? Mr. Chair, we do have a question.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Mr. Lobley, I'm just wondering if you can clarify for us before we answer your questions. Who is the intended audience for these documents that you're talking about creating, and why would we need 27 different documents instead of sort of a one-stop shop?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so the 27 documents are supposed to direct staff. So it will be directing staff on how to build parks that respond to community needs, but they are supposed to also be publicly digestible. So the intent of these documents is that a member of the public will easily be able to go onto our website or pick up a leaflet that says, what are we doing about pets in parks, for example, and they'll be able to see quite clearly what our commitment is and how we are going to be responding to pets in park. So the 27 documents will provide direction to staff when we come to looking at park renewal, rehabilitation, replacement, and new parks, but they are supposed to be publicly digestible.
Okay. And just a follow-up question, are they meant to guide us in all parks, big and small, including little ones like what we call greens or playgrounds, or is it just the neighborhood parks and citywide parks that you mentioned in the document?
Nope. So the guidance documents, through you, Mr. Chair, the guidance documents will guide staff in all parks, regardless of size or shape, although it is obvious that within some parks it may not be possible. And so the classifications of parks, if there are parks which a guidance document specifically refers to, then that would be highlighted in that guidance document.
Thank you.
So just to be clear, Mr. Lobley, you're not asking the questions now. You're going through your presentation, and then we're going to hear from the delegation, and then we'll go through the three questions.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Johnson, a question of clarification?
Yes, I'm just wondering before we vote if you can put the list up again. Thank you.
The list will be up, and as I say, figure one in the report.
But we'll be coming, but this is what we're coming back to, correct? Or are you looking to do this now?
So we're doing it both times, Mr. Chair. So there will be a Menti question to catch quick feedback, and then for more robust discussion, answered again through the main session. So the question should now be up on your screen. Great stuff. Well, thank you very much. And as I say, we will have plenty of time to come back to these over coming months, and the discussion this afternoon will revisit it. Thank you for that. In the interest of time, I'm actually going to skip over this one because I realize that we are running on a tight agenda. Spaces, which is the second part of the document, and which most of the rest of the session will focus on, really does look at the amount and the location of parks, both for today and into the future. We're looking at considering currently underserved areas, what growth will mean for the city, how we continue to build parks into our new communities, and how we might be able to apply an equity-based lens to try and prioritize acquisition efforts in parks and open space as we go forward. Spaces is a standalone document which will be brought to council independently of the overall strategy places and spaces. It will be brought forward in early 2022, well, first half of 2022. It's a standalone document which will inform our parkland dedication bylaw and policy update, which is also to be happening at the same time. So Spaces really does inform the parkland dedication bylaw. As such, it's linked very strongly to changes made to the Planning Act under the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act that were made last year. And those changes to the Planning Act require that council brings forward, staff bring forward to council, and council adopt a new parkland dedication bylaw no later than September of 2022. So we are working on a slightly accelerated schedule, responding to those changes within the Planning Act, because the development of Spaces meets the requirements of the background documents for that parkland dedication bylaw. So really, Spaces informs the parkland dedication bylaw. In order to help us understand the context of parks and open space across the city of Kitchener, staff have started looking at a critical needs assessment at the planning community level. So trying to look at where we've got parks and open spaces from the planning community level, as small a scale as possible, to be able to understand local park supply and demand, and looking at community statistics to try and understand where the needs might be greatest for parks and open spaces. This guiding principle builds on the principle embedded within the 2010 Park Strategic Plan that communities all have equal right to parkland. But the reality is that equal right has not borne out equitable access to parkland. And so one of the things that we'd like to try and address through this strategy is looking at equity serving parks and how parks and open spaces can serve communities equitably, not just only from an equal rights perspective. So thinking a little bit about what might be a barrier to a park, if you've got any ideas that you'd like to share with us as to what you think might be a physical, a cultural, or a personal barrier to physically accessing or accessing a park, then you can provide up to 3 separate answers, or if you don't feel like answering, feel free to press skip. But if you've got any ideas around what you think might be a barrier to accessing a park or an open space, please feel free to share.
Okay, I have a problem. I didn't get my last answer in quickly enough, so now I can't go on to the next question.
So Mr. Chair, you should be able to hit a button at the top that says my slide has changed, and you should just be able to hit view current slide.
Just hit submit on that question you didn't answer. It'll go to the next one.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Great stuff. So again, thinking we might move on. So this is the initial findings when we started mapping out where parks and open spaces are. Now, this is only focusing on local parks, and local parks are the parks that you might expect to walk to. They are made up of 2 subsections of parks, our community parks and neighborhood parks. So these are the smaller parks within your community that you might want to focus on. And the 10 community parks that we've had have been shown on the map for rough locations as well. Each of the areas is a planning community, and the shading indicates how much parkland, local park supply is available in each one of those planning communities. Greens being, the bright green being those that are at or above the citywide average of 9.8 square meters per person. And then as you move through the oranges, the yellows and the reds, you get to those which are progressively less well served. And as noted in the report, we range from some communities in green, which see in excess of 50 square meters per person of local park provision, to communities that see less than 1 square meter of park provision per person. It's worth noting that this map does not include all park space. So legacy parks, those major parks like Victoria Park, Huron Natural Area, are not included on this map. And the reason for that is they're seen more as destination parks that serve a citywide audience. The other parks that are not on this map are our city parks and natural areas. City parks are those parks which serve primarily a sporting interest, and natural areas are those belts of naturalized land that we value as a community, but that can't actually be used for many traditional parkland purposes, such as dog parks, play areas, and so on and so forth. Mr. Chair, we have another question.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, just for clarity, and Niall did reference that city parks are not necessarily included where there's sports facilities, but some of those city parks do have a recreational component for park space. I'm sure my colleagues can relate to some of the areas in their respective wards. Rittenhouse Park being one specifically, it serves a distinct community. It has a lot of green space there, and I think it should be intended for as a park space as well, along with just a diamond. There happens to be a diamond there. Why wouldn't a park like that be considered as a community park?
So I'm happy to take away that point, Councillor Singh. Off the top of my head, I can't remember where Rittenhouse Park sits, but you are quite correct. Some of those citywide parks will serve multiple purposes. What we're focusing on here is purely just those local parks.
Okay, I think it's an important point in my mind that needs to be recognized. And the other is, especially when we have a lot of green space, and that tends to be my agitation for me, when we have considerable investment of city land in our neighborhoods for park that doesn't get appropriately utilized, or a better investment in those areas. So Rittenhouse and Country Hills Park would be two that I would want to identify. Thank you.
I'm very happy to take that one on board. In the interest of time, I will continue. As I say, there's plenty of time for conversation and detail on this one, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chair.
Well, I guess I'm asking folks, do you need to ask your questions now, or can you wait till the end? Margaret, now? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, it will be quick. Thank you. Yeah, my question is just again for clarity. This is only city-owned park. It doesn't. We're not considering as part of these hectares per square meter any of the school parks. That's not included. Okay.
Not included. Correct.
Councillor Hernandez.
Just be quick. I'm just wondering why we couldn't have a full picture of all the parks or something like that. I know it'd be a lot of dots, but at least get a better understanding, because right now it looks like certain areas are under service from local parks, but really they might not be because of all the other ancillary parks that are out there, such as the school board and our major facilities.
For you, Mr. Chair, I'm quite happy to take that one away, and we can share that information.
Yeah, I would agree, Mr. Lobley. I think we need to see a map with everything. The school board one should probably, maybe be on a separate document, only because there's always the possibility that a school gets closed and then that gets lost as a park. And so we need to keep that. We need to keep that in perspective because it's something outside of our control.
To you, Mr. Chair, I will circulate the map. Thank you very much.
Okay, you want to continue?
Good stuff. So that brings us on to the third one, which is really about how do we address this? So does council feel strongly, or does council have views on whether we should be seeking to try and redress the balance and seek to target activity into areas which have got a lower provision of local park. How can we go about doing so? So again, a couple of questions on the Mentimeter. So first off, is equity access to park spaces something which is important? Should we be seeking to redress the balance? Great stuff. I think that's a good reflection, solid reflection, is clear direction, clear idea. So now we're really talking about parkland provision. And again, there's some information around this in your park. So in 2010, in the report, 2010, council established, staff and council established a planned target for those local parks. So neighborhood and community, discounting all the other ones. So schools, natural areas, city parks, and so on and so forth. A target of 1.5 hectares per 1,000 residents, which equates to 15 square meters per person, was established at the target back in 2010. The inventory at the time was about 10 square meters per person. So this was always an extraordinarily ambitious target in 2010, and updated as in the last couple of months. The 2021 inventory shows that of that amount of parks, local parks, focusing just on those local parks, our current provision rate is about 9.8 square meters per person across the city. How do we get parks? Over the last decade or so, we have got parks exclusively through parkland dedication processes led by the development community and development process. And so that really is the process by which, through development of greenfield and redevelopment, so site plan, we are able to collect land or cash in lieu of land against all development types. And so that is generally either a percentage of the development area of land that we collect, so 5% or 2%, depending on the type of development, or in site plan redevelopment, we can collect 1 hectare of land for every 300 units that are built, or cash in lieu to the equivalent of 1 hectare of parkland for every 500 units that are built. So we either collect land or we collect cash in lieu of land as a basis of development. What that's led to over the last decade has been, in the vast majority of instances where we see redevelopment, so severance and site plan, as redevelopment of existing sites, we are almost exclusively collecting cash in lieu of parkland. So a developer elects, or council staff work with the developer to collect cash in lieu instead of them providing land. And in greenfield subdivisions, almost exclusively, we're collecting 5% of the subdivision area and developing parks on that. What that leads to is a large number of parks being developed in subdivision areas and us collecting cash in lieu instead of parkland for many site plan areas. What that means in overall, in sense of the 15 square meter per target from 2010, is that our existing acquisition tools, the tools that we rely on through parkland dedication, are not sufficient to meet the target that was set in 2010. If we were to collect 100% of the maximum parkland dedication that we possibly can do at all instances, so no discounts, no lowered rates, no median rates, collect 100% of it and invest all cash in lieu that was collected in purchasing land to make into parklands, our ceiling rate, so the absolute maximum rate that we could achieve, would be collecting at 8.5 square meters per person. So basically, we are collecting, we can collect towards a ceiling rate of 8.5 square meters per person against our current target 15 square meters per person. So the two don't balance up. So one of the things on a go forward basis is, where do we want to set a target? And how does that target compare to the current average provision of about 9.8 square meters per person? So the first question I've got for you is, should we consider discounts of any sort when we're going into provision rates? And again, just for clarity, we're not making any decisions here. All we're looking for is a high sense of council's direction as to whether discounts are appropriate in terms of parkland dedication. And then in the next slide, I'll be asking, where do you think those discounts should be applied? Okay.
Councillor Singh,
Oh.
you have a question?
Yeah, it's just quickly as answers are coming in. I have a bit of a kind of different direction on this one. Like, why are we focusing more so on the space, or so hectares per, I guess, number of people, or the site being developed, as opposed to overall investment? Like, we have enough green space, I think, in some regards, in some communities. It's a matter of reinvesting in those parks. Can we not take into that account that it's better utilization of the existing space, and how do we reinvest? How do we animate that space already, rather than just focused on how do we acquire appropriate funds to purchase new land? So I don't know if now or Niall, you can address this later. It doesn't have to be now.
To you, Mr. Chair. I might leave that one for later because that does feel like a bit of a meatier question. Okay, and this might be a short one. So for those of you that answered yes, and maybe for those of you that answered no as well, if we were to ask for discounts, what sorts of things should they be for? Great stuff. Okay, again, thank you very much. So if we're thinking about this target, and we're not talking, and to Councillor Singh's point here, not talking about the reinvestment, simply talking about the provision of parkland. If we are setting a target, what should that target be? Not all cities set targets, so we don't need to set a target. It's not something we must have. We traditionally have had, but cities like Toronto and Ottawa do not set targets for parkland provision, but most municipalities in Ontario do set targets. Cities like Kingston and Guelph have targets which are higher than our current provision levels. Cities like Waterloo and Hamilton have target provisions which are fairly similar to the sorts of provision levels we currently have. Cities like Brampton, for example, have targets which are much lower, but actually have provision levels which are significantly higher than their target level and higher than we currently have in terms of just sheer amount of parks and green space available for members of the public. So when we're thinking about targets, and the next slide asks you to think about this, we're not going to try and pick a number, but where do you think we should go? And I should stress that the stay the course, stretching, and ambitious and challenging all require additional investment over the investment that we currently put into parks and open space. So the status quo option is the one that sees us investing the sorts of money that we currently collect in through development, sea parkland dedication, running only as it is right now to the maximum level that we can collect. So the three options above that, stay the course, stretching, and ambitious and challenging, will see us gain more green space, but will require significant or additional investment, and certainly for the ambitious and challenging, quite likely significant investment from other sources other than development funded sources as we go forward. And obviously, the higher up the scale we go, the more likely we are to be able to address equity issues. And so the next slide asks you for your views and opinions on this piece. That's fantastic. Thank you ever so much. So those answers give us a very quick snapshot of where Council's head is at. Will help staff as we go forward over the next few months, but we're looking forward to the remainder of the conversation. So those next steps are, we're going to be beginning public and stakeholder engagement on the spaces part of the open space, places and spaces strategy through fall and winter of this year. We're going to follow it up with some councillor one-on-ones. If you would find benefit to those, we'll be reaching out to talk to you about what your planning communities look like, your ward looks like from a provisions perspective, and examine what your ideas might be locally. We'll be beginning the public engagement on places as well through this fall and winter. That will continue over throughout the whole of 2022, with the final strategy for places coming back before council in 2023. The draft spaces strategy, as I say, that's the one that we need to work on quickly for the parkland dedication bylaw. We will be bringing back to council in spring 2022, and the draft places strategy much later in spring 2023. So I'll leave you with a recap of the 3 questions, the 3 strategic discussion threads for today, and a reminder that we're really keen to focus in on items 2 and 3 on this list, as places is open to significant public engagement and lots of opportunity for comment and question as we go forward. And with that, I'll say thank you very much and hand back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Lobley. Councillor Michaud, you have a question before we go to the delegation?
No, I just had a comment, but I can hold that till later. Sorry. I'll put
Yeah,
that down.
we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So we will now hear from the delegation, and I'll remind delegations that they have 5 minutes to speak. Normally we wouldn't hear delegations at the strat session, but clerks accepted it. So I just want to remind council to just ask questions of clarification if you do have any, but obviously the public will have a whole public engagement piece, and ultimately it'll come back to council later on to engage. So Mr. Burrows, welcome. And you have 5 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. So I'll go, there we are. First, I'd just like to say, well, I was originally going to say it was a great job by city staff. And just after that presentation, I have to say it was really an outstanding job, as a lot of great information came out of this. I'll be very quick. This plan is great, shows a lot. The more you look at it, the more interesting it gets forward. But I'm just going to focus on one area. Forward. Which is the area where I live here in Victoria Park, forward. And as I go forward, I'm going to use a comparison in density forward, and that's going to be equal to this area here in Victoria Park, which is about 200 units. One of my neighbors rightly brought up the point that we all have backyards. So even though Victoria Park is deficient, currently many of us already have backyards forward. And 200 units in terms of people equal about 1 condo tower forward. So when we consider this, I think we have to consider that people don't have access to backyards. And so thinking about cities that already have that condition, so we can kind of look into the future a bit. This is London, England. The east-west divide is roughly down the center of the screen. You can see in the west, lots of parkland, and in the east, very little parkland, which is a typical scenario forward. I used to live right in the middle, and only a few years ago did I realize this is because of the lack of parkland and a place where I could afford to live forward. And I used to work in East London over here. And I'm going to come back to that park right beside it. If you note at the top of the screen, the scale goes from 4 meters per person. Remember, Victoria Park is less than 1, up to 32 square meters per person. So the green ones are 32 meters per person. This is in London, England, downtown. The park next to where I work has 8 to 16 meters per person on average. So forward. But I'm going to look at this park here on the east end. We used to do work for people who lived here forward. It's a great park, Regent's Park, probably about 6 to 8 times the size of Victoria Park forward. So we did some work for a building over here for an owner of a building. All the buildings that surround this park are actually owned by the Crown forward. And so the types of buildings facing onto this park, we worked for the owner of that end unit of this townhouse, That building, well, that unit, sorry, will sell for about 25 to 30 million Canadian dollars. Forward. And to give you an idea of the scale, how that compares to Victoria Park, so you can see, and this is diagrammatic because I couldn't exactly find an area equivalent, but to give you an idea of the scale of the park relative to Victoria Park and the density, so an equal density of, say 200 inhabitants or one condo tower. Forward. And then that park that I was mentioning near where I worked is over here, there, and forward. So this is London Fields, very similar to Victoria Park in a lot of ways. Forward. And you can see how the park itself is actually very similar scale to Victoria Park. In terms of density, people around the park are about 2/3 the density of current Kitchener density. And this is a park that is 8 to 16 square meters per person. And these are people who don't have, most of the people don't have backyards. Forward. And this is what it looks like on a hot day. 8 to 16 meters per person. Forward. Now this, I realize now is a bit skewed because it's referring to green space. So that is not entirely correct, but I can say the London number average is 16 meters per person. Kitchener, we're about 10. Victoria Park, we're less than 1, as we know. Toronto, I don't know if that includes the lake or not, probably not, but they're at 12 overall. Forward. And so back to home. There's been a lot of discussion about this, and I haven't been involved in all of them. I can say I've been involved in some. Forward. Rick Haldenby has publicly commented that the city should consider purchasing this property here on Margaret. Forward. Mario Chalansky, a number of other people have mentioned, the city should, and not purchase, actually just city and or region maintain ownership of the land's current bus terminal, just the tip of Victoria Park. Forward. Shirley Gosling, who wanted to be here today but couldn't because she had prior engagements, she's given presentations, I believe, to council as well, that the city should retain ownership of Bram Yards, and that could be a good spot for a park. Now I've taken the liberty of expanding that all the way along the rail line. Forward. And an idea I've had recently is potentially turning the golf course into a park, and this may raise a lot of eyebrows. But when thinking about it, the golf course is typically accessed by people with cars, and as the city's mentioned already, there is lots of parkland, green space around the city. So if there was an opportunity to purchase some land or acquire some land to potentially make a park or a golf course, this would give residents access to free parkland. And I think that's the critical point here, is that there's a really big cultural shift here where, most of us are used to having backyards. And the point here is that this has to be free access for people, and not something we have to pay however much. I don't even know how much it costs to play golf anymore, but not something where people have to pay to access. A couple of comments, if I got a couple more seconds. In terms of this, this study, I did, I really appreciate seeing it. I asked for studies earlier on during the Cycle Networks thing. And this goes a long way to addressing some concerns I've had about downtown. I think there's a real cultural difference that sort of needs to happen. One of the questions that came up earlier in terms of what we include as parkland, I wonder if one way we could do that is actually allowing neighborhoods to say, this is the parkland that we use. We consider this parkland. Victoria Park, for instance, not included, though I can say a lot of people use this as parkland, and they spend all day here, literally. So that's everything I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burrows. Are there any questions or clarification? There don't appear to be. So thank you very much for coming in and sharing those perspectives with us today.
Thanks.
Some great ideas. Okay, so with that, we'll go back to Mr. Lobley's. If you can put your Last, your page with the 3 questions back on the screen. And we'll give an opportunity for council. And we have just under half an hour left in this session. So if people want to comment on maybe all 3 at once, that might be the most effective way to do it. So Councillor Davey.
Sorry, I took a second to unmute there. Yeah, I just wanted to actually start by saying I'm not sure if I'm alone in this, but I think we really need more opportunity to discuss this. This is a very serious issue that a lot of us care deeply about the parkland in our city. We have different viewpoints, and I really appreciate the work that Mr. Lobley's done, but I think we need a wider discussion. So I want to begin by touching upon, I had the same question as Councillor Johnson from the beginning. I think it's critical that we include the school properties in the city, because we need to look at this not as in isolation as a city, but how a resident would look at this. And I see more people in the area that I live in. There's more people taking advantage of the local schoolyards than the parks themselves. So if we're going to identify where the deficiencies are, realizing, Mayor Benedict, yes, that the schools can be sold. That's a very rare occurrence. And if I recall correctly, we do get some sort of first right of refusal in acquiring those lands as well, should that happen. In order to assess the deficit, if there is a deficit in some of these areas, I need to know where the school grounds are. So I think that's first and foremost, and I'm going to have that discussion with Mr. Lobley when we do our one-on-ones and go forward there. The rest of it, I think it's very important. I think I'm absolutely down for the equity lens. It was a little bit unclear in terms of what that meant in terms of I know there was economic status or income status in there. I'm not really sure what exactly that part means at this point, because while I think that we need to help lower income people across the board for everything, I'm not really there if the direction is going to be that lower income people should have more park space than higher income people, because that should not be part of the equation. And the last thing I want to leave this with is, from my sense, it's almost more important than the amount of parkland is the infrastructure that we put into our parks. There's so much space in a lot of I'm going to say the suburban parks that's just really unused, where I'd love to see, basketball nets or tennis courts or that sort of thing that people will actually use, instead of just plain open space and then sort of calling it a day. So I'd rather see the infrastructure in those spaces as a higher priority than just adding more space itself. Thanks.
Some great points, Councillor Davey. Councillor Singh, you're next in the queue.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and kind of a similar sentiment as Councillor Davey, who's already kind of touched on a number of things that I have a similar feeling towards. As for the opportunity for council engagement, I would say the same. This is a very large topic. Personally, for myself, that's been of importance for a very long time. Of a better utilization of our existing spaces for our parks, of reinvesting in our green spaces. And further to what Councillor Davey has said, I think that's absolutely the key focus of this discussion. It should be at least of what type of investments do we need to make in our parks where we can have a better utilization, where we can animate those spaces better. Again, and I think it's difficult sometimes to see how we're doing when we look just within our community. When we start comparing ourselves with our neighboring communities or what others are doing, I think we can start being a lot more innovative. We can start raising the bar a little bit. This is an opportunity for comment, I think, so I'll save it. But just if you look at some parks in Guelph, Jubilee Park, if any of my colleagues want to search that. It's a neighborhood park that's really well effectively I guess designed that every square inch of that park is something to do with varying different activity. So answer to the questions that are before us, I think places, it's not necessarily the amount of space, it's the space that we have of how it's being utilized, how it's being reinvested in. So that's for space as well. And for park provision, revised targets. You know, I'm a little more hesitant of broadening, you know, additional parklands or additional parks while we're not necessarily putting the necessary monies or investments in the spaces that we have. And again, further to what Councillor Davey has said, that has to go hand in hand with partnership with you know, green space that maybe perhaps with the region, perhaps, you know, provincial federal lands, or even especially the school board. How can we invest in those park spaces together? And that way, if there is a change down the road of school closure, the fact that we came in as a partner of investing, you know, for animating green space on school land, perhaps that can be a part of the arrangement that some space is left, even if the school is closed. So those need to be an important part of how we plan for our parks going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I echo those comments about the infrastructure that's in the parks. We'd really like to see parks, you know, attractive to a large demographic, not, you know, just kids. It seems the parks are pretty much, you know, here's your swings, here's your play structure. It'd be great to see areas where there's seats under shading for quiet reflection. Also maybe outdoor equipment for, you know, exercise equipment. You know, as kids grow up, they, you know, still go to the park and find things to do. When it comes to equity, big supporter of that. Would love to see some sensory playgrounds scattered throughout the city as well. And, you know, just the ability to really be able to use the parks fully. You know, I know some parks, I'm sure Councillor Michaud can attest to this, Montgomery Park, where the neighborhood we grew up in, it's basically the exact same equipment that was there when, you know, we might have played on the swing. So it'd be great to, you know, have these parks gone through and, you know, some of them updated. I mean, I understand, you know, there's costs involved and we try to maintain and keep our playground structures in great shape for as long as possible. But I didn't receive a comment from a neighbor that is near Casey Park in my neighborhood, where they said, you know, when our kids, you know, were young, they used Casey Park and played on that equipment. Now they're grown up and our grandkids come here and it's still the exact same equipment. So, I mean, that's great that equipment has lasted that long, but you know, the ability to update all our parks on a semi-regular basis would be great too. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mayor Urbanovic, and thanks for the presentation. Yeah, I think for places, I think a lot has been said, and I agree with a lot of the comments that my colleagues have mentioned, but I have a hard time trying to make a really good, informed decision when I think we could access, you know, other areas within the city that may not belong to us. So like we're including like hydrolands, we're including GRCA, we're, you know, the school board, et cetera. I think that needs to be looked at in more perspective in my mind, because I think that will give a clearer picture. As far as the smaller parks, like what we're looking at here, spaces, I agree with what Councillor Schneider had mentioned, and I think not all parks shouldn't be just designed for just children in general, and I think, you know, we should be looking at more of a focus with dog parks in that aspect, and then with the equity, I think equity is a good thing, but it shouldn't be you know, putting a park where it doesn't make sense. And then even if there is park space, like what are the trails that are there that are connecting it to? Like, does it have to be a park? Can it not be trails? You know, like I think that's part of a bit of an aspect that we should look at in that combining those two in that lens instead of building it in a separate focus. And as far as park provision targets, I mean, I'm at this point, I would be leery to want to set a target without having, again, that full picture, because I'm sure if we had all that data, that could change a lot of the perspective of where I think certain needs may be. And I could be wrong, but it would be good to have that data.
Great, thanks, Councillor Ioannidis. Councillor Chapman.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and for the discussion. So I have concerns about the intensification in the downtown core and the available parkland for the new people that are coming into the core. We don't have a dog park in downtown. The Victoria Park, which is the primary park, will not be sufficient for people that don't have backyards. So I think this is of great concern. And I think for me, that when we talk about spaces, that's where the primary focus should be. And I don't think we can leave it up to just cash in lieu of parkland to reach the needs of the community. I think we have to proactively find properties that we can purchase and turn them into parkland in the downtown area. I think, sometimes in parks, just having more picnic tables and benches is also a very valuable thing. And I'm thinking about parks in my ward in particular. You might have one picnic table for the whole park. And sometimes people just want gathering places. Although I agree that, the places component of more elements, more infrastructure is also very important. I think there are quick and easy ways that we can make our parks more inviting, and that is just having simple things like parks and benches. I think that looking at things through an equity lens, of course, is very important. One of the responses I gave to an earlier questions are, what are some of the obstacles? And wood chips. I mean, we don't think of it, but wood chips in a playground are an obstacle for people that have mobility issues or might be in a wheelchair. So, keeping those things forefront in our minds. I think, I would like to see sticking to a target of 10 square meters per person. I wouldn't want to see that come down. I think if we set the bar high, I mean, it's higher would even be better, but certainly sticking with the 10 square meters per person, we're not far below that at 9.8. So I'd like to see us hold at that and try to increase it if we can. I was just looking at a document that came out in 2013. And at that point, it was talking about asking staff to initiate the process to modify the parkland dedication policies and bylaws to discontinue the downtown waiver and establish a maximum rate of 0.15 hectares per 300 units for residential development. And I mean, that was in 2013. We were talking about getting rid of that waiver. And I really hope that happens this time through. I guess those are my initial comments. I think we have a real deficit, certainly in the downtown core. As we see more and more development happening, people need places to go. And that space component, I think, is very important to not let slide. I worry about it not coming to us till 2022, because if a property comes available, what are we going to do? Do we have to wait till this policy comes out, or can we act on it now? That would be one of the questions I would have. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, staff, so much for this report. It's terrific, and I agree as well. We need to have a lot of community engagement on this. Just doing engagement right now on Westwood Park in my ward, I'm seeing the interest from people. COVID has really shown us even more so the increased importance of our parks and just what they mean to our residents. it has made me so happy when I'm out and about to see so many people playing and using our parks more than ever before. But it has also highlighted that we need to be doing a lot more with them as well. I would agree with Councillor Chapman in that a park does not have to have kind of major playground equipment in it, etc. Sometimes we need little meeting places in, you know, a place with a picnic table, with some benches, etc., especially in the downtown. And if we're not looking at getting those spaces now, we're going to run out of the opportunity to find those spaces, because as development continues, we're not going to be able to find those green spaces in the downtown and in other areas of the ward where intensification is really happening. And what I hear from residents is just how important our parks and trails are to them. I thought it was interesting to look when in Mr. Burrow's presentation, where he showed the picture of people crowded into Victoria Park on a nice day. And it really, our parks are getting more and more crowded. And if we don't, we absolutely have a time crunch here. And we need to be looking at how we deal with this sooner rather than later. For many residents, our parks are their cottage. They don't have a backyard. They don't have an opportunity to go elsewhere. Parks are where kids are experiencing nature, because in some places they're not you know, able to travel to other communities, see different things, and they're so incredibly important to our to everyone's mental health and to their physical health as well. Schools, absolutely, we need to have them be part of the equation here, but we also have to remember about schools, though, being a former public school board trustee, we can't rely on them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're you know, basically out of bounds to residents during school hours. So that takes out 5 days a week between, let's say, 8 and 5 o'clock at night in some cases. So we need to think about how we use them, but be considerate about how we look at that equation in terms of considering the safety and usage of them. And as well, I can't remember who brought up about the trails, but they are so incredibly important, and they need to kind of be part of this picture. So I'll look forward to seeing a map which is more fulsome in terms of what the different green spaces in that are, and how we use them. But thank you so much for starting this conversation. Staff, you've done a great job.
Great, thanks, Councillor Johnson. Next up, I have Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the things I was thinking about have been said and then some, and I agree with all the council, all that you're talking about. I'm going to just touch on what I know most is you know, the ward that I represent in Ward 4, and one of the councillors, or maybe more of you, touched on you know, have more amenities in parks and brings people out. Well, the Upper Canada Park is a perfect example. I've never, in the 25 years I've lived in this ward, seen that park so activated every single day, and I suspect that COVID had something to do with that, but I think it's just going to carry on. And I mean, that park, it's got a cover, it's got picnic tables, it's got the basketball court, it's got it's going to soon have a skate park, so it's animated perfectly. And again, on the other side of Homer Watson, we've got the small Pioneer Park. This has just a little children's play area, and then a big green area. But the neat thing about it is the trails that we've managed to connect all these parks through. So I think we're doing a great job in that. I am concerned about the newer subdivisions, you know, southwest out further. There's a lot of development going on up there, and there's people that have lived there, I would guess, for as long as 10 or more years. And there still isn't any parkland, and it's not walking distance to anything here in the Pioneer Park core. So I think we have to look out further. I also agree with the downtown, how important it is to keep the park space that's there and be cognizant of any available park space that we could be using. You know, if you can't have any more larger parks down there, there's got to be more green space for people to go. If you look at Toronto, certain areas of downtown Toronto, you can still go to nice places and sit under a tree in a green space. So I think that we have to be cognizant of that. But overall, I'm really looking forward to being part of this process with staff and seeing where we can take, this council can take our strategy for parks in the city. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Michaud. Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, staff, for bringing this forward. I really, like many of my colleagues, I identify this as one of the top priorities in our community, is to make sure that we have good quality parks and open spaces for people to use. I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made, and I want to highlight a couple of the ones that I especially feel strongly about, and that's, of course, that downtown is the development is just way outpacing any opportunities that we have right now for creating more green space. And so I want to thank Councillor Johnson for highlighting the fact that it is an urgent matter and we need to be nimble. If and when there are opportunities, we need to seize them. I also had been thinking about the golf course. We have 2 golf courses, and within the scope of this project, I think it would be a shame if we did not at least give it some consideration, because currently the way it's scoped, it doesn't seem to look at our assets in terms of golf to be included in an opportunity. So I just wanted to ask staff to consider adding that. I think that I don't know why we didn't lift the Downtown K exemption when the development charge exemption was lifted, but let's get it going as soon as possible. I also want to just say I'm interested in the approach with the 27 different guiding documents for staff that would be also digestible by the public. It's an interesting idea, but I'm a little concerned about the fact that many of them will have competing priorities. And if we don't also provide guidance to staff and to the public about how to navigate the competing priorities in ways that are logical and that are going to consider all the needs of the folks that will be using those parks, I think we're going to get into some hot water quickly. So I just want to flag that because when we go out to do the consultations about places and spaces, I understand staff is very clear on what the different words mean to them and what we're looking for in terms of feedback for each of those different consultations. But let's be honest, it's going to be hard for any member of the public to who isn't already thinking about parks in such a detailed way. It'll be hard to tease out the nuances between spaces and places, and so let's take all the feedback, and if it's the wrong focus that people share about, let's just make sure that the consultation captures the information, and then let staff figure out the different ways that they can use the feedback. Those are my main comments, thanks again for bringing this forward. Let's keep the discussion going.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, you haven't spoken yet.
Yeah, a lot's already been said, so I don't want to go over things too much again. But I think one of the things that is important is utilizing the spaces we have better. I think we have, especially in the ward I represent, we have quite a few park spaces, but there's just a play structure and then there's open space. And I think we need to program or establish some more usable space within there for the community. And I question whether or not the current parkland designation is enough in new subdivisions, or whether or not it should be more. Sometimes we're getting a really nice woodlot and not able to put in parks. So I think that's an important piece that we should look at and address moving forward. With the target, I think that we should target the 10 square meters per person target. And there also needs to be more funding for features in our parks. And I think that's something that we can look at through this document. Yeah, and I'm just happy to see the project starting, and I look forward to further engagement with council and with the community. So I thank staff for everything they've brought forward to date, and I look forward to what comes forward in the future.
Thanks, Councillor Galloway. Councillor Gazzola, you haven't spoken yet.
And it's nice waiting till the end because everything's been said. So there's very little I can add. Every aspect has been looked at. I've been around for a long time, and parks is an area that I've supported very heavily over the years. We can never have too many parks. And in looking at this, we have to take everything into account, I think. A number of you have already spoken about areas that we're not utilizing to its top advantage. And we have to take schools into effect, parks, trails, bicycle lanes, everything. And when you take all of these things into account, we have to also be cognizant of going forward that there are a lot of demands for different areas for our dollars. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to make sure we're dividing things up equally for all of the areas. One of the areas I do want to really emphasize, and it's in the target. I think we have been growing by leaps and bounds and bringing more and more people, but we haven't kept up with our parks to deal with it. I listened to Mr. Haldeman's presentation earlier this summer, and he showed the number of new projects that are in process. We still haven't seen the results of them, but he showed one of his slides showed the number of people that you can get into Victoria Park, and one particular picture showed the whole park with people standing at nose to nose, and that was just a small percentage of the people that are moving into our downtown. We have many new buildings coming. It was interesting to see that one tower with 200 units and how that compared to that area in Victoria Park. So one little tower is the equivalent of a large green space residential area now. So as far as I'm concerned, the target has to be higher. We need to be higher because I think we have fallen behind, especially in the downtown, and we're going to have to catch up with that. So I think we have to set the target higher, and I think we're going to have to meet it. So, but it's a good study. It's a good start. It will be interesting to hear what the public have to say. And going forward to the public, I think I want to emphasize that we really have to remember that there's no free lunch, and everything will cost money, and we have to decide where do we put that money. Everybody will want, and everybody I know wants a green spot on every corner, but these things do have cost money, and we're going to have to work as to where they go. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gonzalez. Some sage advice there. Councillor Ioannidis, before I wrap up with my comments, you had one point you missed.
Yeah, and thanks, Mayor, for indulging me. And Sarah did mention this too. Again, it's about dealing with our golf courses and everything else. And in particular, I think Mr. Burrows even flagged that. I think our golf course is something that could be, because it's such a single use type of activity on that. I think we need to think a little broader with regards to that park in particular, because it's a significant land portion as well, and it's very centrally located, and it's sort of near transit. I think it makes a lot of sense that maybe somewhere down the line that we should start envisioning this place as something more. And I know I remember bringing this up to Mayor Zaire when I first came on council about that, and I know it's a hot topic with regards to golf courses, but I think it's time to start maybe seriously looking at that and seeing what can be achieved with that site more holistically than just a golf course.
Okay, thank you for that. And I presume when you're saying that, you're referencing Rockaway or both golf courses, Councillor Ioannidis?
Just Rockaway, because I think, but I still think even the golf course in Dune should be representative of the park space for that area as well. Like, so it just goes along with the theme that we need that full picture, wholesome picture of all the park space.
Yep, thank you. So thanks everyone for your comments. I think a lot of excellent comments have been made and are reflective of the priority that I know each and every one of us hears from our residents about the importance of parks, about the importance of green space, about the importance of amenities, and that has all come, even more to the forefront over the past 2 years. As people were looking to get out and look for safe alternatives for being engaged. I want to thank staff for all the work that's been done thus far, but this really is the beginning of a significant body of work. And as several of my colleagues said, I think it's one that's going to need to engage council significantly more and the community, because there will be a lot of passion around how this moves forward. I think as we look to understand it, having that comprehensive map that several people have spoke about will be important, as will a communication strategy that the average person can relate to when we're talking about this. I know there's a lot of really smart, really good people in our area that are responsible for parks management. But the average citizen shouldn't need a PhD to sort of understand where things are at and what we're aspiring to. For me, the importance of having a target around the numbers of square meters per person is important. But I think equally important to that is looking at it within a certain geographic area. Just like we strive, at the region with GRT, seeing, a bus stop within a certain distance of a home, or an LRT stop within a certain distance of a home along the LRT route. I think, part of what we need to look at in terms of overall space is also proximity to these amenities. So what's the proximity to a playground? What's the proximity to a sports field, a splash pad, an accessible playground, and a number of those kinds of amenities? Because that's where I think you start accounting then when you look at the proximity issue as well as the square meters per person together. That's where you start identifying some of the problems in particular that several people spoke about in the downtown. But admittedly, this won't be a downtown phenomenon. It'll be a phenomenon through Midtown, downtown, in through the Cortland area and so on, basically everywhere the LRT goes. And so I think we need to look at it from that context. And the last point that I will emphasize actually two last points. Certainly looking at better use of existing parks is incredibly important, because I think we haven't necessarily kept up with from a vision point of view. And also as we look at the overall pieces, I think there is some correlation here between what we may be doing with our tree canopy overall as well, as we look at, you know, the overall greening of the city. And so how does that connect those, you know, those green corridors into these park spaces, and the role that that plays from a environmental and CO2 reduction point of view, and so on. So all of these things, you know, I think become combined, and it's part of the work, for example, that we've been doing, you know, as I know staff have been doing and was written up in the record this past weekend, in terms of our stormwater management strategy and the disaster mitigation and adaptation fund, and the 50 million that we got from the federal government in that regard as we go forward. So those would be my comments, and I guess I'll just turn it over back to staff if you have any final comments, Mr. Lobley.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of council. That's been fantastic to give us a good insight. Look forward to taking forward the conversation through one-on-ones and through the wider engagement. So look out for meetings to be scheduled over the next few weeks, next few months. Thank you very much.
Sounds great. Thank you. So if folks want to take a 5-minute bio break, it's 2:08:40. We will start at 2:15. Hi, folks. We'll be starting again in a minute. If folks can turn their cameras back on when they're back, so I know that we've got quorum, please. Okay, looks like we've got quorum. So we'll get going, and so the next report is the strategy session on priorities for the planning division, policy and research, and customer experience and project management teams. It will be divided into two sections, each one taking about half of the time, and we'll start with the policy and research team piece, and I guess I'll turn it over to Rosa. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and members of Council. I'm pleased to be here today at today's strategy session to speak about recent changes to the Planning Division and the future priorities for our team. The Planning Division recently undertook a review that resulted in a team reorganization, which is comprised of 3 teams: Development Review, Policy and Research, and Customer Experience and Project Management. I'm going to share a presentation now to take you through the remainder of my speaking points today. The Development Review Team is responsible for reviewing and providing professional recommendations on a variety of development applications. So our official plan amendments, zoning bylaw amendments, plans of subdivisions, site plans, condo applications, and committee of adjustment applications. They also lead community engagement on site-specific development applications. They implement urban design guidelines, and they conduct site inspections to clear conditions and release securities. Unlike the other 2 teams, the Development Review Team's workload is largely driven by the applications that are submitted to the city and guided by various legislated timeframes. Today's strategy session will focus on the priorities for the Policy and Research Team and the Customer Experience and Project Management Team. I will be leading the first half of today's strategy session, which is focused on the criteria that are used to prioritize the Policy and Research Team's work plan. And Janine Oosterveld will be joining us as the Manager of Customer Experience and Project Management to lead the second half of today's session around future priorities for that team. The Policy and Research Team supports the Planning Division in a variety of ways, including managing and updating the city's official plan, managing and delivering long-range policy projects such as master plans, secondary plans, and the new zoning bylaw, commenting on provincial planning legislation and policies, participating in the Region of Waterloo's policy initiatives, such as the Regional Official Plan Review, and supporting development applications and corporate projects with specific expertise. Since late 2020, a number of observations have been made about the city's ambitious policy and research team's work plan, including the following. Staff resourcing challenges have been compounded by an incredibly ambitious work plan. There has also historically been a lack of policy work prioritization, which, along with new and emerging projects, has led to an unmanageable workload for the policy and research team, which has resulted in many projects and initiatives taking many years to complete, sometimes as many as 4, 5, or 6 years. And finally, extensive time has been dedicated to master plan level initiatives without concurrently bringing forward new zoning, secondary plans, and official plan amendments, which are important statutory tools that can be used to defend the city's position at the Ontario Land Tribunal, formerly known as the LPAT, and prior to that, the OMB. Based on these observations and through detailed discussions with the policy team in early 2021, it became evident that the team's work plan needed to be reviewed. Over the course of several meetings in 2021, the team's work plan was reprioritized and the highest priorities were identified using the following criteria. Projects that have a legislative requirement, have been identified in the city's strategic plan, and or which have strategic importance for the city, were identified as highest priority. Following that, projects that will address current and or future development pressures that proactively mitigate future risk of unplanned development in key areas. So things like our secondary plans and other policy studies. Projects that are ongoing and close to completion. And finally, projects that represent quick wins, so lower effort but high impact. In addition to those criteria, the team also considered other criteria that could be used to prioritize future work, including projects that have a citywide, followed by community level, followed by neighborhood scale impacts, projects that address equity, diversity, and inclusion, projects that address climate impacts and sustainability in a significant way, projects that raise the city's profile and reputation, and projects where sources of funding are available through grant applications, for example. So our first set of questions for council today related to the policy and research team's work plan are really around these criteria that will be used moving forward in order to prioritize and manage our ambitious work program. The questions we have for council are the prioritization criteria on the previous slide the right criteria to prioritize future work plan project ideas? And if not, what is missing? And secondly, are there other planning policy related initiatives the council would like to see on our future work plans? And now I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Can you go back to that previous slide so that folks have it in front of them?
Sure.
Okay, so feedback from council. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'll have a go at it. I mean, I think the prioritization list is fine. I just wonder, you know, when we look at dates of, you know, how things are going to come forward under Crosby, for example. If I were to try to prioritize it, that would be my number one. But of course, it's not the number one in the MTSAs and the UGCs. But if I look at the priorities, it should be number one, and because of so many things that it will impact. So I guess I have a disconnect between the prioritization criteria and you know how we're approaching the zoning, the new zoning bylaws. And maybe it's something you can't answer right now, but that's sort of my observation, I guess, at this point.
Ms. Bustamante, did you want to say anything or?
Through the mayor to Councillor Chapman, thank you for the comments. So if you look at the staff report that did accompany today's strategy session, Crosby is listed as one of the highest priority projects on the team's current work plan. and it is currently on track to be finally completed after, I think, 7 years in the making. It is on track to be completed by the end of 2021. So we do recognize the importance of having an updated zoning bylaw that is in effect and complies with our official plan. And then I think the other point that was mentioned had to do with the work around the MTSA areas. And I can also confirm that that is also on our list of high priority projects, largely because not only is it legislated and has requirements that trickle down from the province and the region through to the city, but also because those are areas where we are seeing lots of growth and intensification. So both of the projects that you raised are listed in Table 1 in the staff report that accompanies this item. And they are flagged as high priority projects, and they have been resourced by our policy staff.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, I think we do have addressed a good roadmap with what's being presented, Rosa. So I think the points that are added here are definitely the right directions for us to be looking at. When we're addressing equity, diversity, and inclusion, I think the focus needs to be specifically on inclusion, which does address diversity and equity, especially when we're looking for land use planning or processes with which there ends up being a little bit of a resistance in new projects carrying forward in built neighborhoods, but at the same time that it goes counter to the inclusion initiatives or having a more broader inclusion of our I guess the different eco economic and diverse backgrounds of people being able to enjoy the amenities that are in built up neighborhoods. So I think that I would like to see a little bit of a greater focus there. The other is of course innovation. I think we need to start looking towards different trends of how development is proceeding, how intensification is proceeding, how our cities being growing up, and we're lucky enough that much of the growth that still is going to happen is to happen. We're not built out yet, and we're in a very transitional point in time where technologies are being utilized, and even transit with just pinpointing one, autonomous vehicles. How will all that address intensification and developing within our urban boundary? And that goes to the point of sustainability, and sustainability is of course for the environment, but sustainability of financial sustainability as well. So I just wanted to flag those things that you've outlined. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic, and thank you, Rosa, for your presentation and the criteria. I think I agree with probably most of everything that you've put here with regards to the priority levels. I just have a few follow-up questions with regards to the way some of our current staff is working, and I'm wondering if that's going to be changed. In particular, we have Andrew working with a Better Tent City, so I'm trying to figure out why he's working on that file when we're so short on these other projects. And then on top, the program for the program that we just put out with regards to this competition for a backyard, like how did these get in there quickly with regards to staff's timing and being used relatively to everything else that's here?
Through the mayor, maybe I'll speak to Mr. Ramsarup's responsibilities, and then I'll pass it over to Rosa, who can talk about how that team's supporting development, as well as some of the priorities or what has advanced from the policy team already. And so Mr. Ramsarup has been seconded into a position to support affordable housing. He was assisting with the development of the project plan, and then that transition to implementation. So A Better Tent City is only part of the portfolio that he's working on related to the affordable housing strategy, which are important goals of council and a priority that council has set. And so his time is purely focused on affordable housing and related to policy and the Better Tent City component.
Okay, and I like that direction, and I don't have an issue with that when it comes to dealing with the affordable housing component, and that's something I think we need to up our priority on with regards to this list. Other than that, I think everything is is right on.
So
Thank
through
you.
through the mayor, if I could just respond to Councillor Ioannidis's other comments. The backyard homes design competition was considered the implementation piece that supported our additional dwelling units work that was taken to council earlier this year. So council may recall that in the springtime, we brought forward a report that amended zoning bylaw 85-1 to allow additional dwelling units across the city. And part of the way we wanted to spread communication around that work and that new policy change was to bring forward the backyard homes design competition to make sure that there was interest in the community and that creative ideas and solutions for those tiny homes or backyard homes were brought forward. And so staff did talk about that item when we were discussing the priority projects for 2021. However, that was a project that did involve multiple divisions across the corporation, and it was able to come together in a relatively short period of time. So the team did decide to advance that work forward and proceed with implementing the backyard homes design competition, which has run over the course of this past summer and actually just closed at the end of last week. So that's a short answer to the other point, Councillor Ioannidis.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, thank you. And good job, Rosa, on bringing together all of these moving parts and working on prioritizing what needs to happen immediately, and then what can maybe wait a little bit. I want to ask if the RIENS study recommendations, which only a few of them have been implemented, if those will be incorporated into the Crosby Stage 2B, or if we can expect that to show up again on the work plan. You're on mute.
My apologies. Through the mayor to Councillor Marsh, that's a great question. We are having active conversations with staff on all three teams actually about the RIENS study and which components of it can be implemented through the rest of Crosby and which may fit better in as official plan policies, and which items may not really live in either document, but they continue to be more like guidelines or encouragement type directives that we apply to work going forward. So wherever possible, we will take the RIENS work and put it into the zoning bylaw so that it does have that sort of teeth in the regulations, but we are still going through all of the different components of RIENS and confirming that.
Yeah, okay. I do think that as much as it's important to focus on new projects, especially ones that have a citywide impact, the RIENS study was extensive, and it's not exactly citywide, but it expands across many neighborhoods. And these are the neighborhoods where, as you know, intensification is happening. It's affecting neighbors all the time. And so I think that it will be, if the question is, what else might we want to add here, would be, I would just add making sure that we find ways to implement the RIENS study recommendations in a more dedicated way. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. I understand the strains that planning staff are under. And following from that, actually kind of in opposite direction than Councillor Marsh, not with respect to RIENS, but did staff consider, with the constraints that they're under, recommending dropping any of the projects?
So through the mayor to Councillor Davey, another great question. I think at this time, what I would say is staff did not recommend formally dropping any projects. I think the likely outcome would be delaying or unfortunately postponing some bodies of work until a later date. So right now, essentially everything that sits on the work program today has either come about through requests from council or community members or previous commitments or previous decisions or legislative changes. So there wasn't a discussion about dropping items, but rather prioritizing and sequencing and recognizing that some things may be not initiated until 2023 or 2024, as the case may be.
Okay, so like looking to, help with the load. Clearly, my concern is the application status and what we're seeing with the abbreviated timelines from the province in terms of processing applications. I want to see us processing applications and not having them go to the LPAS. So that's where I'm going with the next couple of questions I'm going to have. So when I look at obviously, so the legislative requirement stuff, we can affect it, but we shouldn't really be affecting that. So it's more the ones without. So a question, does I was someone that supported the cultural heritage landscapes projects, but that was with the understanding back in the day that there was excess, capacity in the planning department, which isn't here today. I do see that the priority and timing is to be determined, but I guess my question on that is, when that does get implemented, will that take away from the actual designating of properties versus the landscape? Because I'm more interested, and I think my sense is council is as well, but I'll leave it to them to speak. But my sense is that we would rather see more properties designated than landscapes.
So through the mayor to Councillor Davey, that's a great question as well. I can definitely take that back to the heritage staff and confirm that. I think the item as listed on the program today refers to the cultural heritage landscapes. However, there is that accompanying piece that has to do with the designation of specific properties. And so I can go back and seek some clarification and provide a follow-up to council on that.
Okay, because even though it is prior timing to be determined, again, I would much rather focus on the former than the latter. And the last one is, can you remind me, like, the 2-second description of downtown signage and wayfinding strategy? Because my sense is that, the Googles of the world will do a much better job than the city of Kitchener ever could. And is that something that we should maybe be looking at dropping as well?
So through the mayor to Councillor Davey again, thank you for the question. Again, this is not currently something on the work plan, but something that has come up, and it related to a number of questions and comments and inquiries we received that have to do with signage and wayfinding and directing people through our downtown to key landmarks, key parkettes and public spaces, and discussions about should there be gateway signage downtown? If so, where should it go, on which streets? And so one thing that our team began discussing was, is there a need to work collaboratively with economic development and or the BIA and others to develop something comprehensive where we have little key maps, we identify the locations downtown, we pick 2 or 3 gateways, for example, and approach it through a consistent lens rather than sort of responding on an ad hoc basis or putting different types of signs in different locations. So I think that one still rests quite low on the work program priority list, but it is something that has come about through conversations, and especially as we see more development and more pressure downtown and more people living there, there is a need for visitors and residents to have materials to help them navigate our downtown.
Thank you for that.
Through the mayor, if I could just jump in really quickly, because there was a question that was sort of asked by 2 members of council related to staff supporting development applications as well and making sure we're meeting our legislative timeline. And so there are essentially 3 policy planners that are only supporting policy, and the rest of the team has been supporting development applications through some capacity in their daily workflow. And so we have been agile and making sure that we are spending time directing staff resources towards policy or development applications, while still trying to manage sort of the important policy that needs to move forward.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Marsh.
Yeah, point of information, just
go ahead.
Just quick, I don't know if how engaged planning staff have been with other departments like economic development so far in downtown signage and wayfinding, but this has been an ongoing conversation for several years already. And my understanding was that we're moving ahead on that sooner than later. So it'd be great to make sure that we're all on the same page and that I don't think that's going to be a big problem or take up much time, because I think we're far ahead so far on that.
Thanks, Councillor Marsh. Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Mayor. I did good work, good discussion here. I would just like to see the word affordability in there somewhere. I know that the highest priorities are those identified in a strategic plan, and affordable housing is part of that. It would just be great to see the word in an additional prioritization, maybe where we're addressing equity, diversity, inclusion, or where sources of funding are available through grant applications. If affordability, just the word could be in there, would be great. I think optically, when the public sees that, that's a word they search for. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Schneider. Councillor Johnston.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you so much for asking us these questions. And I really appreciate this. In terms of projects, one thing that I'm really finding is when neighborhoods are affected by something new, be it intensification, be it a new development, et cetera, that they really want to have the opportunity to be able to look at the big picture for what that means for a specific community, as in things like secondary plants. So will we have the capacity, or can we somehow put in there some capacity in terms of being able to look at neighborhoods with a broader scope as to how intensification is happening in areas that haven't been previously built up? And in particular, I'll call out Belmont Village for one.
So through the mayor to Councillor Johnston, another great question. So yes, that is something that we are talking about as a policy team. I think there's a recognition that historically, we didn't always do the most robust engagement with some of our secondary plans and some of our large scale master planning work. And so there's definitely an opportunity moving forward to do something much more multifaceted, use a lot of different tools, both in person and online, and to be able to capture a wider segment of the population that is affected by the secondary plan areas and the different areas where we do master planning and secondary planning work. So that is something very top of mind for us. And I think as we continue to see growth in the city, we know that residents are interested in that information. They're looking for it. They want to understand what the longer term, bigger picture is. And so as we set out to tackle the next number of secondary plans, we will definitely keep that in mind and think about how to get the best reach possible with our engagement tactics.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that answer. Residents really want to be engaged in their neighborhoods, and they want to have a say in how that progresses. So I think that's going to be really important. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. I don't see any other hands at the moment. Excuse me, just briefly, I too concur with many of the comments that have been made. I think these are the appropriate prioritization criteria. Just from conversations that I've had with members of council, while certainly not, certainly not a consensus, I would say that generally speaking, there seems to be a little less, focus or prioritization around heritage landscapes than maybe buildings, as has been noted earlier by Councillor Davey. I do think, looking at how that affordable housing component, can work its way in there would be helpful. The last point, and I guess I'm just wondering, with the activity that we're seeing, the revenues that we're seeing coming in, and so on, I'm just wondering, I mean, is there a place here where some of this work could be supported or augmented by utilizing some of those additional revenues for either some contract staff or some external folks who could help you through some of this work, but also make sure that the processing is happening in a timely manner, so that we're not seeing things go to the new version of LPAT prior to us having had a chance to make a decision on it.
So through the mayor, to the mayor, that's another great question. So what I can say is that earlier this year, when we recognized there was an influx in development applications in the city, we did pursue an opportunity to set up a short-term temporary contract with an outside firm that could help us with some of our development application processing times. And so I can confirm that we did reach out to at least 8 different firms that have professional planners that do work and could support us. And I'm remiss to say that All of them declined the opportunity to take on some of our files because their workload at their respective firms was so heavy and so busy that they actually didn't have capacity to support the city through a short-term type of contract or arrangement. So unfortunately, we have explored that option, and at the present time, that's not available to us on the development review side. We are still going back to the drawing board and exploring other options and seeing what else we can do. But all of that, suffice to say that there is a lot of development interest happening in the area. I think not even just in the region, but also in the greater Toronto and Hamilton area as well. And so there's a lot of, there's a shortage of planners to almost process and support all the development that's happening on a larger scale.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey?
Sorry, just on that is new information, and perhaps we should discuss it another time, but that's even pushing me more in the direction of just being clear with staff that if the workload that council has put forward is too onerous and you have to come back again in 3 months and we have to reprioritize, that's something that it's reality, and it's something that I think we all need to be ready to look at again.
Okay. So I think those are all the comments we have, Rosa.
All right, thank you through the mayor. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to the next set of the conversation today, which Janine Osterveld is going to speak to. So I'll move it along into the customer experience and project management section of our strategy session today.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you, Rosa. So I'm really excited to share with you our vision for the newly formed customer experience and project management team. First, I'll just start by just highlighting some of our set core services. So what are those priorities that we're working on already as a team? And they're outlined here, and they were in the report as well. So I won't go into all of them in detail, but just sort of at a high level, we do have a number of application and permit review that's obviously a priority on the team, as you've mentioned throughout the earlier conversations, even about policy work. And so that's obviously a key priority for us, in addition to front counter inquiries. So those are the ones that come via phone, the appointments only right now, or the people that would actually come to the front counter as well. And then those email inquiries, which we see a high volume of right now, since people aren't necessarily coming to City Hall. There are going to be a number of process changes with the front, going to that front counter, one service counter delivery model, where our front counter team is going to be working closely with the customer service team, the broader customer service team across the corporation, to come up with that smooth transition to that model. We're involved with digital transformation and development review, and we've done a lot of work so far on that. We're currently not taking in paper applications, and everything's coming in through a digital format, but we don't have all the tools in place to make that happen perfectly. So we're working through that in terms of what does that look like? Where are the gaps in how we're providing that digital service? And we have the KPMG report underway right now, their review, to provide us with recommendations for what those next steps look like. Looking at things like opportunities for how we can best use staff resources. So for example, if we automate portable signs through the digital transformation process, that could save some time of staff working on that particular component of the work, and then open them up and their capacity up to do some of the other interesting and exciting projects and initiatives that we want to continue to work on. We're involved with the Great Places Awards program that you are familiar with, and we've been supporting neighborhood meetings in a new way. So our team has been helping to set up the virtual neighborhood information meetings, taking those RSVPs and supporting on the back end of that technical component. And through the concierge program that we're piloting this year as a secondment position, we've been able to support affordable housing projects, including the YWCA's project through to construction right now, and then any ongoing challenges or issues that come up, that this concierge position continues to support them through the process to make sure that they're going to meet their target set by the federal funding of getting occupancy by the end of this year. So those are examples of what we're working on right now as priorities. And then on the next slide, we've got outlined what some of those other potential options or ideas are for how we can allocate our time as a new project management component of the team. So this one is going to come up. I'm going to go through all of these, and then this is going to be part of that first question on the Mente survey. So the first one is the lean process reviews or development reviews, where we take a look at how we can find efficiencies in how we do our various development review for different types of applications, and how can we make them as efficient as possible. But they're also, beyond that, the project management component of development review Kaizens to help the community really understand what planning is all about. So those video explainers, for example, or a future speaker series. The next one is enhanced project management support of the development review team. So this speaks to that concierge kind of idea, whereas if there's a project management lens taken to the development review applications, that position can help support moving through in a really clear and concise manner, whereas we all know that development applications are getting more complex and they have a lot of engagement. So with this team, can we provide more wraparound services to development review to help support the planners, so the planners don't have to be everything on a project? They can take on obviously the core elements, but they have the support of project management to keep that project going, that file going, and making sure that they're meeting those legislative timelines and that engagement component. In terms of public engagement, we all know, and there's been a lot of discussion about this already, how do we strengthen our public engagement? And that might be through both the technical side of things, like what tools can we use to get to be more effective at our public engagement? So for example, visualization, how can people really understand and give their feedback in a way that the way that is meaningful, but because they really understand the project. It's also that equity, diversity, and inclusion lens in thinking about like all the information that we're gathering through surveys of public engagement right now. How do we use that information and make sure that we are reaching the population that is reflective of our community? And where there are gaps, how can we effectively adjust our engagement or try new strategies in order to really have meaningful engagement that meets the needs of our community? Next up is the Urban Design Review Panel. So a number of municipalities have an urban design peer review panel that includes representatives of the development industry. So it could be architects, landscape architects, urban designers, planners. So that professional advice from outside of city staff that help just really support the urban design objectives of the city. So City of Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, City of London, and others have such a panel. So exploring what it would mean to have a panel for the City of Kitchener. What projects would we take through that panel in terms of getting that higher level of urban design and what that looks like? Next on the list is, as I mentioned earlier, we are doing the pilot project right now for the Affordable Housing Concierge Program. So what would that look like beyond what we're doing right now? How can we use that sort of project management lens to help support other initiatives that are corporate priorities? So, possibly continuing with affordable housing and making sure that they go through the process as smoothly as possible, but possibly also with a sustainability target. If you meet a specific sustainability objective, you can also use this particular service to navigate your process, navigate your project quickly through the process. The next bullet is end-to-end digitization of the planning process. So acquisition, training, and support, like what are those additional tools, whether it's software or hardware, that we need to make sure we're really being effective with our planning processes. So right now we're looking at things like iPads, like how do we do our field work in making sure we can do inspections and have the tools that we need now that we can't roll out the long piece of paper and mark up our plans with any of those inspections. So there it ends up being a range of both hardware and software, but it's also those wraparound supports. Like, how do we make sure that we have the procedures in place so staff know everybody's doing the same thing through these new processes, giving them the support and training that they need in order to effectively do their roles. And finally, one of our other ideas is, just providing some support or project management for capital projects. So this might be things like placemaking projects. So as an example, when the Queen Street reconstruction was coming up, our engineering team reached out to planning and economic development and others and said, okay, well, how can we work together? Because we know you want the street to look, we imagine the street to look different than a simple reconstruction. So a project manager on this team could help, coordinate with our engineering team to actually carry out those placemaking objectives that go along with the road reconstruction. This could also be other corporate initiatives. It could be partnering with the University of Waterloo or Laurier or other educational institutions on a particular initiative. So what I find right now is that there's so many exciting projects and initiatives that we could do, but these are always the side of the desk projects that we could, without having a core complement of staff that can take them on and prioritize them, we definitely can't get to them all. So one of the things that I'm asking of you today is to take a look at our list and help us to prioritize. The next steps for us is going to be work planning. So we'll take a look at what's coming to the top from a priority perspective. And then it's going to be a matter of work planning, seeing what the resources and time and other criteria are, in addition to how you feel these prioritization should go. And then we can figure out how to actually place them and resource them throughout the next few years. So I see Councillor Johnston has a question.
You know what? Oh, thank you. I probably put maybe put my hand up too soon, but I thought you were waiting for us to give you direction. Maybe that's coming up.
It will actually, yes. So if we can move on to the next slide.
Yeah,
I'm going to get
fine.
Margaret.
Thank you.
We'll
Awesome.
keep yours up for later, Councillor Johnson.
Okay, so with this, Margaret Love is going to assist us by doing a Mente survey. So the first one is going to be as listed. Please rank the potential 2021 to 2023 opportunities for this team from highest to lowest priority.
Thanks, Janine. So as I'm pulling up to share screen here, if the mayor and councillors can go to their email, at the break, I've sent you a code. So you go to www.menti.com like you did for Niles, and then the numeric code is in your email and you can copy and paste. And I'll give you a minute to do that. Does everyone see that on my screen now? Or I guess, is it showing on your screen? I should ask. Yeah, excellent. So I see two people caught that I sent the link during the break and they've already completed theirs. So this chart will change as more counselors begin to complete the ranking. Please let me know if you're having any problems with Menti.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one quick question before?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the implementing digital solutions, I understand that would obviously help on the customer side, and Ms. Oosterveld touched upon it, but my understanding is that would also potentially increase productivity on the staff side. Is that, did you say that as well?
Yes, there is opportunities to find efficiencies on the staff side through the digital solutions. It's not 100%. There are things that are going to take the exact same amount of time, whether you're reviewing something on paper or digitally, but certainly where we can find solutions that are efficient on the staff end, we'd also be looking for that.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we're going to give you a couple minutes to complete this. I realize you have to evaluate the 7 options for potential additional priorities for this team. I'll watch as the counter goes up. Okay, we have 5 of 6 of 10 in, or 11, I should say. Okay, just 2 more to go. All right, we have them all in. I don't know how tiny that is on everyone's screen. Janine, would you like me to read any of them out?
They are quite readable on my end. I'm not sure if others are feeling the same. What I'm seeing come up at the top is that the number one priority seems to be that affordable housing / sustainability concierge service. So how can we navigate things through the development review quicker for things that are corporate priorities like sustainability and affordable housing? And again, that really speaks to number 2 as well, in terms of wraparound supports for the development review on those complex applications that even go beyond affordable housing and sustainability, which is that number 2. So great. This is very helpful in understanding some of that initial reaction to priorities. The next question is more of an open-ended question that we have. And so we'll go through this question, give you some time to answer it. And then it looks like we should have a bit of time, Mayor Bravanovic, to do a bit of a roundtable. So in addition to plugging in your answers to this question through Menti, if possible, if we could do a bit of a roundtable, that would be greatly appreciated, just to hear any other feedback on this one. So the question here is, does council have any other priorities that they'd like staff to consider for the new customer experience and project management team?
And you can enter as many responses as you'd like. They're short responses. It'll tell you how many characters you have.
Apologies, does this include the engagement piece as well under the project management team?
I would say through the chair, I'd say yes, you can. If you want to elaborate on that anymore, you can.
Okay, thank you.
So if you pop back to the main meeting screen when you're done, you'll see the responses showing on the screen. So please enter as many ideas as you'd like. All right, we'll give it 30 more seconds and see if any new ideas. Oh, there's a new one coming in.
It's interesting looking at I don't know who posted the education one for the public as to what engagement can go into, but it's kind of like the idea of, I think, of a planning 101 for the average citizen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's a new one just popped in.
So this is great. We're getting a lot of great ideas here. What I'd say is, Mayor Urbanovic, if you wouldn't mind possibly leading a bit of a roundtable just to see if anybody wanted to verbalize or explain any of their feedback. And then as they're doing that, if anybody else wants to key in anything else on through Menti, you're welcome to do that as well.
Absolutely. And I will just begin, Janine, while folks are thinking about how they may want to respond to those two questions with any verbal additions. Over the last little while, I've certainly had some, and we always get a mixed range of feedback on things, but in general, folks have commented to me recently about, and they recognize that we've got some pressures in the division. But this really applies to you, Rosa, the team, Jonathan, Margaret. They recognize that we've done some work to improve the processes, and they're seeing the difference as a result of that. And in particular, in comparison to their those that are working in other cities, found that what we've been able to do with site plan of putting it online has been well received, and a great improvement in comparison to other communities. So I'll just share that with the group of you. Councillor Marsh, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple points. First, I want to echo Councillor Davies' comment that yes, it's really unfortunate that planners are in high demand, or in planning groups are not able to make time to help us out for temporary contracts. But then I would just say that, council does not want to sit idly by. At least this is my perspective. We don't want to sit idly by and watch as the planning department is inundated with applications that are unable to be processed in a timely manner, without really encouraging staff to use more resources and I don't know if it's temporary, positions or what have you, but the buck does stop at council, and so for us to know that this is a really challenging planning environment, and to not direct staff to consider all the options as much as possible, I think would be a miss. So I don't know if we need a direction, because it would mean going above and beyond what is already included in the budget, or I don't know, but I think we need to take that seriously. I would just say that in terms of the priorities, they're all a priority. Even though we ranked them, I don't think that number 5, 6, and 7 are necessarily less of a priority than the others. I just think that we need to, you've got some great priorities already listed, and I see that some of our colleagues, free ice cream, have added some useful and some less useful comments, but mostly useful. So I also want to say that I think we need to seriously consider optimizing the usage of our Civic Innovation Lab and using things like virtual reality, 3D modeling to help members of the public to understand the impact of new potential developments on the public sphere and on the pedestrians' perspective on it. What is a new building that is such and such number of stories high? What does it feel like when you're walking near it? We have the technology, we have the talent in our staff complement. So let's see if we can maybe optimize the use of those more. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Sarah. Mark.
Yes, thank you. And one of the priorities I think that will be important will be to improve our ability to digitize and do more self-service, especially when we're down staff. I think that the more things that are easier for people to upload and to do that way with us is going to free up some staff time, I'm hoping, so that they can then be working on engagements in other ways. So I liked as well that you mentioned that you're looking at ways of working with the 3 post-secondary institutions that we have here. All of our professors need to do research. They need to be involved in research. They like to do research where they don't have to drive somewhere to do that too, or drive very far to do it. So we are particularly blessed in this community to have 3 great schools here, a lot of really engaged faculty members who would love to comment and work with us on ways to improve what is now their community as well. Does that take some extra work in doing that? Yes, but it really, I think it will really pay off in spades for us. And we're, like I said, we're very blessed to have that. And that's not even mentioning the students that have to do all of their different design projects and that as well, who would probably love to be included in this. So I was really happy to hear that was mentioned. One thing I'm thinking that in terms of customer experience, I think that our communication and education component with our residents is so incredibly important. Time after time, I'll read things on Twitter about, the city needs to ensure, this about affordable housing or that, and having clear things that say, we would love to do that as well, but here's what we can do, and here's what we can't do. I think more and more information that we can be communicating and sharing with our residents, and knowing where the stepping off point is, where they can get involved, where we can get involved, where the province is involved, would really kind of clear up a lot of areas so that we can work with them on the things that we actually can work with them on. And thank you again for this opportunity to comment and go through this exercise.
Thanks, Councillor Johnson. Any other feedback?
Mr. Mayor, if I could just respond to a point that was made earlier. So through the mayor, one of Ms. Bustamante's first-year priorities was a reorganization of planning. And so what you're seeing today is the result of that, the 3 teams that are identified and some of the questions on how we really focus our customer experience work here, and then work with that policy team. And so as part of that reorganization, the team is going over complement by 5 FTEs, and we are actively recruiting for those right now. And so it's not dire straits for the team. I know there was a bit of a pinch for a little while, but we've been working through the management recruits. And so we filled one of those with an internal candidate, Mr. Stevenson, who's the manager of development. And we'll have an announcement coming out tomorrow to council on the manager of policy. And what I can say is, under council's leadership and the work that's been done on the development services review and a bunch of policy plans and important planning related documents, we have a really strong reputation in the planning industry for quality of work and the great work that we're doing, the innovation that we're doing in the team. And so we are attracting good talent through that. And so while we've had difficulty finding a contract service, we are finding that, as we build out the team through the active recruitments that we're going through, we're finding good caliber candidates coming through.
Great, thanks for that reminder, Justin. Any other feedback for Ms. Oosterveld? There doesn't appear to be any. You did such a great job of of the presentation and the questions. Thanks, Janine. I guess, Ms. Bustamante, over to you to wrap up.
Yes, through the mayor, thank you for the opportunity to conclude our conversation today. I just wanted to let council know the next steps for us. So after hearing all of today's feedback in the strategy session, we will be taking this away as a planning division and looking at our teams and working on an information report that we will bring back to council to detail the 2021 and 2023 work plan and respond to some of the questions and items that were raised today. I think one final remark I'd like to make that maybe wasn't captured earlier is, Mr. Riedman did explain that we've gone through a recent reorganization in the planning division. And so we do have 3 teams, but I do want council and the community to know that all 3 teams work very closely together, very collaboratively. And there is quite a broad range of sharing of responsibilities and, being agile and flexible and reallocating work as required in order to meet our legislative timeframes and to respond to the priorities that are emerging. So although there are 3 sections within planning, they all do work together very closely to support one another and to make sure that we are doing our best to respond to the high number of development applications, as well as continue to move forward our high priority policy projects. So I hope that answers some of the conversation that's taken place today on that point. If there are any other final questions or comments from council, I'd be happy to hear them. But otherwise, council can look forward to an information report being brought back in a couple of months' time with an update on these 2 work plans. Thank you.
Awesome. Well done. And thanks to everyone, both in planning as well as in parks planning for the 2 items today. I think we've had some really robust dialogue and look forward to these items coming forward in the weeks ahead. With that, then, I will take a motion to go in camera. Councillor Galloway Seelock, Councillor Marsh, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And so folks want a 5-minute break before we start in camera? Okay, we'll take 5 minutes.
Are we staying